Discipline Priest is probably the only class I can think of that can be played more than a couple of ways, which means there are many ways you can accomplish the same task by taking different routes. In this video, I will explain some concepts and ideas that I have personally learned playing Disc Priest in Shadowlands 2v2 and 3v3 Arena. I also encourage you guys to discuss your thoughts in the comments section below. Since Disc Priest is so versatile, I'm certain everyone has their own opinions and best practices, so if you have any advice or thoughts, please share them below. Now, let's get started with talking about some core concepts. To give a brief description, Discipline Priests use magic to shield allies from taking damage as well as heal their wounds. This is the description WoW gives them, but it's almost too general, so I created my own description. Discipline Priests prevent damage by shielding their allies, leveraging shadow magic to deal damage while simultaneously healing their allies with use of atonements. Disc Priests also have to carefully balance their choices of healing and damage throughout a fight, or they will become unbalanced and start to hurt their allies or themselves. Let's talk for a moment about balancing heals. It's important to understand one major concept of your healing rotation, and it's surrounded by three abilities: your Shadow Mend, your Penance, and your Power Word Shield. So let me talk about the rotation that I'm referring to here. Your Shadow Mend is a quick heal, and it wraps an ally in shadows, which heal for 8,534 damage in my case, and the ally will take 427 damage over time until they've taken a total of 4,267. It's a little confusing because if you heal an ally for 8,000 and they're taking 4,000 damage, then you would kind of look at this ability as just a 4,000 heal, but that's not the case. You kind of have two options when you're playing PvP for Shadow Mend. You could cast it once for a big heal, and you can also throw a shield on them for about the same amount of damage absorption that they would take as a dot effect of Shadow Mend. So if I were to cast Shadow Mend on myself and then pop a shield, I can actually guarantee that I'm taking 8,000 heal, and then I have a shield to prevent the rest of the damage for the dot effect. So that's pretty nice. And the reason I threw Penance in this rotation is because if you were to Shadow Mend Shield and then Penance, now you're actually guaranteeing a 10,000 heal on top of basically 10,000 heal of Shadow Mend. So that's 20k healing with no dot effect as long as the shield's on there. But the shield is important not for just the damage absorption effect, but also the atonement that it applies when you shield an ally. And if you're not familiar with what atonement is, that is, it heals an enemy, or heals an ally whenever you deal damage to an enemy. We'll talk about that in a moment, but that's the three major concepts. Obviously, you wouldn't want to spam Shadow Mend like this and not do anything about it, because if I cast it 3 times, sure, I'm healing myself for 30k, but I'm also taking 12,000 damage as dot effects without any repercussions. Of course, it does apply atonement, which is nice, so that'll offset some of that dot effect on its own, but that's something to really look out for in your main balancing heal rotation. As far as balancing damage goes, damage can be rotated many ways, but typically it's 3 major spells. Provided you're Venthyr, you have Smite, Purge the Wicked, or Shadow Ward Pain if you're not running that talent, Penance, and Mind Games if you're Venthyr. I left out a few, but we'll talk about that one in the next section when I talk about balancing mana and shields. But basically, your damage rotation is throwing a dot on a target. In this case, I have Purge the Wicked, which is a dot effect. And then your Smite just simply deals damage, which obviously with Atonement will offset any dot effects or enemy damage with healing. You have Penance, which will fire 3 bolts. And keeping your dots up is also super important for your rotation. And then, of course, Mind Games, you have, if you don't know what Mind Games is, definitely learn it. It does a lot, so I'll read the description here. Assault an enemy's mind, dealing 9,719 shadow damage and briefly reversing the perception of reality. So for 7 seconds, the next 15,000 damage they deal will heal their target, and the next 15,000 healing they do will damage. So it basically just reverses everything. So it's great to use on big burst against an ally to give them a really good heal, and also damage the enemy at the same time. It does a lot of damage up front, and if it crits, it does way more than anyone really imagines. But it's also great to use on healers if they're trying to heal their enemy. So like this is great against monks who can reverse mind games onto you, or a warrior that might have spell reflect up when he's really low. You can pop this on a healer, and the healer won't be able to heal the warrior during the time of mind games proc, so for 7 seconds. So it's great to use in that case, but it's most commonly used when a target enemy is low, as sort of an execution strategy. So let's say you're paired up with a marksman hunter or a warrior, or something that it does a lot of damage up front, especially to low targets. Mind games is a great way to secure the kill, especially if you have any sort of CC on the heal. The third concept I want to go over is balancing mana and shields. So what I mean by this is, as you're doing damage, Disc Priests are sort of notorious for running out of mana, so you have to balance that in some way. Now, you have a lot of ways to mitigate damage. You have your Power Word Shield, which is a damage absorption. You have your Atonement, which you can think of as damage absorption. If you have Atonement on your ally and you're dealing a lot of damage, you're mitigating a lot of the damage that they're taking by offset heals. And you also have Mind Blast, which, if you don't know what that is, it blasts the target for a set amount of damage. In this case, it's about 2.2k. But it also prevents the next 8,000 damage they deal. So you want to use that on high damage targets, you know, Demon Hunter, monks, hunters, warriors, things like that. Pretty much every single time you have it up, because that damage mitigation adds up quite a lot. If you cast Mind Blast, you know, 10 times, that's 80,000 damage that you're mitigating in a match. And that's pretty common in a 2v2 or 3v3 arena to cast that anywhere between 6 to 10 times during a match. You also have Shadow Fiend, which will generate 1% mana each time it attacks. It's also great for bursts, so if you're focusing a target, you throw Shadow Fiend on, and you throw a Power Word Solace at them, you're gaining immediately 2% of your maximum mana, almost immediately, but also dealing a ton of damage straight up front. Especially if you have Purge the Wicked on the target at the same time. Something like this for your burst, and then throw a Penance at them, Mind Blast. That is a lot of damage mitigation, a lot of mana back to you. It doesn't seem like a lot, but Power Word Solace is up on a really quick rotation. So I have this little thing down here to tell me when it's up. Pretty much every time that's up, you want to use it. Of course, it's kind of hard if you're getting worked by like a warrior or a demon hunter to use that very often. Another thing I want to talk about, especially with balancing mana, is using your Shadow Fiend right out of the gate. Obviously, you don't want to use it at full mana, but I tend to try to use it within the first 20 seconds of the match. So, you know, I'll start casting spells and using mana. And as your mana gets a little low, you know, we'll Shadow Mend a bunch here to use a lot of mana. So once you get to about 70% mana, that's when I start to use Shadow Fiend, because it will start amping that up at a little bit. But the reason I do that in the beginning of the match, like at 70%, is because you're probably going to be using it again, especially against another healer damage comp, or something that you think will take a little while. You know, a 5-minute match, you could use Shadow Fiend twice for sure. So that's a lot of mana back to you. It's a good way to balance your mana. Of course, using Power Word Solace anytime it's up will help as well. And I pretty much use that straight out of the gate because 1% isn't a lot. You know, it's anything below 50,000 mana for me. Power Word Solace is going to rejuvenate some of that mana. And it does about as much damage as Smite does. So it's not like it's messing up my rotation. You know, I can hit Smite, 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 and then Solace like that. It's actually a quick little burst because it's an instant cast too. So that's something to keep in mind. And the last thing I want to discuss was the PvP talents that you can choose, and their sort of use cases. At least this is how I view them. So I know it's a lot different for everybody, but this is just how I run it. So I typically tend to go for Inner Light, Inner Shadow almost every single game. And the reason I do that is because you can toggle it during the match, and it's pretty nice. So you have two abilities. You have Inner Light, which reduces mana cost of healing spells by 15%, and Inner Shadow, which will increase spell damage and atonement healing by 10%. So I tend to go for Inner Shadow almost exclusively in the beginning, unless it's a high DPS comp, so like a Ret Peli Warrior or double DPS. I then will probably go Masochism with Inner Light, and Masochism is when you cast Shadow Mend, instead of the dot effect, it heals you. So if I think I'm going to get worked really hard, this is a great way to spam Shadow Mend, which is pretty much your most expensive cost if you're spamming. It's a good way to offset that healing as well as do extra healing to yourself. And then typically with double DPS comps, I'll run that with Dome of Light, because you have this amazing combo, which Dome of Light and Pain Suppress at the same time will deal 50% reduced on top of 40% reduced. So if you can do the math, it's 90% reduced damage inside the bubble. This is great for openers like Double Marksman Hunter, something with a crazy amount of DPS up front. You could easily Trinket, Bubble, Pain Suppress, and that will be 90% reduced damage. Of course, then you can throw some damage absorption on you during that time, maybe penance yourself, and Desperate Prayer if you need to, which will increase your maximum health by an insane amount. So it's a great way to mitigate upfront damage like that. Of course, you have to be super quick at it, and it's very difficult, but it can be done. So typically I'm taking Blaze of Light, though, with Inner Shadow almost every match. And the reason I do this is because they play along with each other. So increases spell damage, which means more healing, and atonement healing, which means way more healing, on top of the damaging effects of Smite and Penance are increased, and Penance increases or decreases movement speed by 40%, which is nice. The movement speed decrease for enemies is great if you have something like a warrior that has a hard time chasing hunters around, and then it's great for you, of course, if you're running the body and soul talent, where you can give yourself a double speed buff. So if you're running around with your bubble and then you penance, you get a double speed buff. You're insanely fast during that time, so it's really great. You know, if you're trying to get away from someone, you can easily do that with a bubble penance. You're just insanely fast. So that's what I'm typically running, and this is great for things like warlocks and something with a lot of dot effects, because you get a lot of healing through atonement this way. And I don't think I've ever replaced Ultimate Radiance. It's just too good for me. This is insanely good, even in twos. It's an instant cast of Power Word Radiance, and it also applies a smaller atonement to it. I think your regular atonement, is 14 seconds on things like your shields and Shadow Mend, but the Power Word Radiance gives you sort of a minor version of atonement, but the heal is insane. It's so good, and it's an instant cast, so you use it real quick, you get an 8-second atonement, but you heal also you and your ally at the same time as an instant cast. There's not a lot of instant cast heals. You have Rapture, but that's your main that's a huge one. You have Pain Suppress if you're running the conduit that heals on top of it, which I am. But at any rate, Power Word Radiance is a great instant cast heal. It is a lot of mana, 3,250, so you have to use it conservatively, but it saved me so many times, especially with a large dot, like a Warlock Shadow Priest combo, where they're just applying dots everywhere. It's great for that. Sometimes I will swap out this middle Blaze of Light with Improved Mass Dispel, depending on the situation. Sometimes I run Thought Steal against like a Rogue Mage combo. I haven't been, though, lately. Stealing the Polymorph is okay, but I don't like that it only lasts a little bit, and like I wish it took polymorph for the rest of the game. I mean, that would be kind of OP, but I don't like that it steals it and you have to use it within 20 seconds. Sometimes I forget to use it, so it's nice to steal away from the target, but you're not really getting the full effect of thought steal unless you're using the polymorph or whatever other ability you take away. That's just one example. For double DPS, things like double marksman or warrior ret, I'll take strength of soul, which will reduce the physical damage taken as long as there's a power word shield. So something like bubble, power word shield, and strength of soul is an insane amount of damage reduction to a double comp like that, where they'll just pounce on top of you and start beating the crap out of you. I know a lot of people will take Schism. I don't usually run Schism at all. I think Twist of Fate typically is a little bit better, especially for high DPS comps, because you get way more healing below 35%, which tends to happen. So if you pop a Power Word Radiance out of like a polymorph, or if you're stunned and you come out and your target's low, this will deal like, I don't know, somewhere like 15 to 20k, 30k if it crits, healing immediately as an instant cast, especially if you're both low. So it's just too good. I don't know. I've used Schism a few times in matches, but I don't typically like it. And that's pretty much it. I don't really use any of the other ones just because I have no real use case for them. But anyway, again, I encourage you guys to comment below if you have any ideas or concepts that I might have missed, or new information. But thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next video.